Fall time, fair time. The annual German Amiga fair took place on the 7th and 8th of December, but instead of Cologne, it was held at the historical city of Aachen this time. Hello and welcome at the Aachen Eurocrest to the Amiga and Retro Computing 2002. Like every year, we are live here for you to report on the latest developments. Contrary to the previous fairs, you can't only see, but also buy new computers. And because it's also a retro fair, additionally to two Amiga successors, also a successor to the legendary C64 is presented here. There's also a new operating system, Morphos, which will be introduced in a second. But first, let's have a short overview. Entering the fair hall, the visitors' attention was attracted by the big booth of Genesee. But of course, this wasn't the only one. The German Amiga Club was aboard again, together with Amiga News.de and Rolf Tingler, who airbrushed almost everything. The news site Funtime World was sharing a booth with Amiga Plus, and APC and TCP was present with Amiga Future too. The Amiga users were able to increase their hard and software stock at Vesalia and KDH Datentechnik. Ultron, a company located in Aachen, was presenting flat panels and a lot more.
The question whether Morphos or Amiga S4 is the better operating system cannot be finally clarified here. However, Morphos is being shown in an almost final version on about 30 Pegasus computers. The graphical user interface ambience seems to be a modern version of the good old workbench, very home-like. As usual, every program has an icon and the structure reflects the organization of the files on the disk. The separate preferences are also available via icons, but additionally there's a global preference too. This MUI application combines all the single pref tools. Any icon comes with a context menu, which allows, for example, getting further information. So the right mouse button can open pull-down as well as context menus. The order of the windows can be changed by activating a button, just like in the Amiga OS. Yet double-clicking the windows brings it to the front too. Moving the window out of the screen is also implemented now. The web browser Voyager, which is already bundled with Morphos, is surprisingly fast on the Pegasus machines. Minimizing and maximizing windows is performing as usual. The Pegasus computers used for presenting Morphos had a very appealing appearance. Noble silver, blue LEDs and a tidy inside spread a breeze of luxury. Of course, this is not the only look of the Pegasus, because the small size of the board fits into almost any kind of cases. The Pegasus is offered together with the Games Bundle, which includes the Morphos versions of 3 modern Amiga games. Questions about the Pegasus were answered by the developers, led by Genesee frontman Bill Buck. You could also get a first impression of the Pegasus competitor Amiga 1. It was shown at 3 booths in the G3 SE version, which has a built-in G3 CPU. The XE version with a CPU slot was not presented, but should now be available. Unfortunately, Amiga S4 is not. That's why the computers ran Linux PPC, which is a welcome alternative to the x86 platform for all TCPA opponents. Various Linux games were shown to demonstrate the power of the board, such as Majesty or a Micro Machines mod of a popular game by ID Software.
As a very special event, the case of the legendary Amiga prototype Walker was publicly opened for the first time. This computer had been developed by Escom in 1996, but was not released due to bankruptcy and is now in possession of Genesee. Apart from an 030 CPU, the so-called vacuum cleaner featured the Kickstart version 3.2, which never made it into a final state. Unbelievable but true, the C64 is alive! At the Amiga and Retro Computing, hardware designer Jerry Ellsworth presented the prototype of the Commodore 1 to the German public for the first time. Apart from a 6502 compatible CPU with 20 MHz, this ATX motherboard features the SuperVIC and the Monster SID, which are very advanced versions of the C64 custom chips. Additionally, the board has an IDE and a floppy controller, mini Zorro and PCI slots, a slot for up to 32 MB of memory, and 2 Amiga clock ports. Of course, you can also use PS2 mice and keyboards. Looking at the screen, you could tell no difference to the original. Thus, 20 years after the release of the C64, the Commodore 1 brings new hardware to the retro freaks. Speaking of the C64, celebrating its birthday, last November's Hobby and Electronics in Stuttgart featured a party for the good old breadbox. Hagen and Michael had a closer look.
Hello and welcome to the Fair Center Stuttgart. Here we've visited 4 fairs at a time. The 8th South German Games Fair, the Model Train South, the Model Making South, and of course the Hobby and Electronics, which also featured the birthday party for the Commodore 64. At the booth of Commodore Connection Line, an altar was built up where fans could render homage to the C64. Additionally, you could see various other versions, like the portable SX64, the desktop version of the Commodore 128, and also the prototype of his successor C65, which had been abandoned in favor of the Amiga at the beginning of the 90s. Even tower cases are now a home to the C64, like it's shown by these modifications.
Of course, time didn't stand still for the C64, and so there are quite a few expansions like the Super CPU module, which accelerates the old breadbox from 0.97 to 20 MHz, and with which the memory can be upgraded from 64 KB up to 16 MB. Instead of the old 5.25-inch disk drive, 3.5-inch versions are common nowadays, and by using a special IDE controller, you can even attach modern hard drives and CD-ROM devices. News about all these innovations can be obtained from the German magazine Go64, which can still be bought at railroad station stores. Concerning software, the C64 is also up to date. With the web browser The Wave, one can surf the World Wide Web, provided they have a super CPU, and using the so-called interlace mode, the C64 can even display JPEG pictures in up to 127 colors, although the graphics chip is only dimensioned for 16 colors.
At the other side of the booth, some joysticks were being tortured by playing the classic summer games. But they weren't just oldies. Thanks to the software producer Photovision, plenty of new games have been released in the past years, like the Dyna Blaster clone Bomb Mania, which can be played with up to 4 players simultaneously, the Jump'n'Runs It's Magic, and Ice Guys, as well as the brand new horizontal shooter Metal Dust, which runs exclusively on the Super CPU and whose digitized soundtrack has been created by the new wave band Welle Erdball.
Und mein Ziel, das vor mir liegt, sieht mich an wie ein Magnet. Und jetzt die Festigkeit zurück, ich muss der Erste sein. Ich fliege in meine Ewigkeit, kurz vor dem Ziel, ich bin bereit. Denn wunderschönem Sternenlicht wartet eine neue Welt auf mich.
And here we're back again in Aachen. Jerry Ellsworth, the developer of the Commodore 1, is now standing with me. Jerry, how did you get the idea to develop a successor to the legendary Commodore 64?
Well, I was always wanting to have a C64 that could do more colors than the original C64. Ever since I was probably 16 years old, this is what I wanted. I was pretty sad because all the newer computers were coming out and they had better graphics and better sound, and my poor little C64 could only do 16 colors and 320 by 200 graphics. So that was when I was 16, but I didn't have the knowledge that I do now, so I couldn't really do anything. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I decided that I wanted to make a small portable C64, maybe a palm top or something. So the chip sizes of these programmable chips had finally gotten large enough that you could do an entire computer on a single chip. So it's like, well, I'm going to do my dream C64 that had, so I can play my old games, but will also have better graphics, and it'll be a little palm top that I can carry around with me, and that's how I got started with this project.
Okay, well, the hardware is of course far more advanced than the original, but is there already any software that takes advantage of these new capabilities?
Not as of yet. The board isn't released to the public, so I have the only two working prototypes in the world, so there's no one really programming for it yet. We're hoping by the end of the month that we'll have at least a small production of them built up so that a few people can get them and start helping us debug the little glitches and problems we have with it. Yeah.
Okay, but software is planned for the new system.
There's been several people that have announced that they want to write specific games that take advantage of the features that I've described that this thing can do, and there's some operating systems. Some people are writing operating systems that say they'll write drivers that will take advantage of the higher screen modes and the larger drives and the faster speed of it. Yeah.
Well, okay, but the Commodore 1 is even more than just a successor to the C64. Because you can switch the RAMs. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, the programmable logic chips, when you first turn the computer on, they're brain dead, and they really don't know what they are, so they have to be configured, and it makes a connection to all the gates inside. And that can be reconfigured to be an Atari or a Commodore 64 or another computer. Just you have to define the hardware that goes into those chips, and it'll mimic those computers.
So tell me, are there already plans for a Commodore 2 or something like that?
Not particularly a Commodore 2. Really what the idea is to make one circuit board that is completely reconfigurable so that you can pretty much do anything you want with it as far as 8-bit computers are concerned, and that'll be it. We don't want to make very many more Commodore 2, which is just a little bit different from it. So I would like to try to make something that uses 32-bit CPUs or something one of these days. It's bigger data and address buses and more memory and faster.
Okay, thank you very much for the interview. And now let's have a look at the other kinds of new hardware. Individual computers, this year's organizer of the fair, didn't only show the Commodore 1. Thanks to new supplies from the USA, the Retro Replay for the C64, an improved clone of the legendary Action Replay, is now available again. The new MK3 PCI Flipper version of the interface board Catweasel was shown for the first time. It can connect to a PCI or a Zorro slot, as well as a clock port. The well-known floppy controller can read almost any kind of disk format by using standard drives. You can also connect original Amiga keyboards and digital joysticks. Finally, there's even a slot for the C64 sound chip SID with an own connector. At the L-Box booth, the complete Mediator family was presented to the visitors. Apart from new mediator models, for example for the A3000, you could also see the new PCI USB controller Spider, which has 1 internal and 4 external connectors and which already supports the new USB 2.0 standard. The USB solutions Highway and Subway, as well as the network adapter Norway from E3B, are now also available. Both USB boards come with a full version of the USB stack Poseidon. As a third USB solution, Vesalia presented the Ultraboost board from Creative Development, which supports both USB 1.1 and 2.0, but not in high-speed mode. New software was also available. IO Spirit, for example, showed version 2.0 of the graphics program FX Paint, which features many new filters, effects and tools, as well as a navigation builder for creating HTML image maps, a gradient tool and improvements in the picture gallery program FX Album. The new version of the scanner software FX Scan features an enhanced OCR support and for the first time the export of PDF files. Just like FX Paint, it is available in a native Morphos and Amithlon version. VHI Studio was presented in the latest version too. This tool allows the recording of videos or still images from various sources or just watching TV on the workbench. Such a source can also be the latest version of Amithlon TV, with which you can use TV cards on Amithlon. At the booth of APC and TCP, Dennis Lohr presented the Pro Tracker successor DigiBooster Professional, which is also available on CD now. Funtime World showed the video player Frogger 2.0, which supports all common video formats such as MPEG 1, 2 and 4, Real Video, Windows Media, QuickTime and effects.
There have also been improvements in the games sector. Some of them have been finished and were presented at the fair. Apart from Frogger, Funtime World also showed the German version of the adventure Aqua, whose concept is inspired by the well-known game Myst. The games collection by Amiga Arena might be interesting especially for UAE users. It contains full versions of various classic Amiga games such as Beneath the Steel Sky and Hollywood Manager. The long-expected space combat game Crossfire 2 made it right on time to the fair. Colorful levels, a bonding story and multiplayer support for up to 4 players guarantee hours of fun. The base set of Tales of Tamar was finally released. Since our last report, the usability of the map has been highly improved. An enormous amount of players can now take part in the game. Rumors tell about beta testers who live more in Tamar than in the real world. Morphos only games could be tested on the Pegasus computers. One of them is Mohun Clone Birdie Shoot, a nice game for a break. The economic simulation Software Tycoon requires more commitment to sell your products. Even Knights and Merchants, which we already introduced at the last fair, was available for Morphos. Not a game, but surely very entertaining is the DVD Deathbed Vigil, which contains Dave Haney's video shoots from the final hours of Commodore and some additional material.
And so also this fair has come to its end.
Many new products have been shown, but the answer to the one question, Amigos 4 or Morphos, can only be given at the next fair.
However, we'll keep you posted. So join us again when we're back live!